The knock came hard and early, the kind that shakes sleep right out of the walls in a small apartment on the 3rd floor. Alina froze beside the sink, her hands wet with soap. 3 babies were crying at once in the next room, tiny voices rising, and falling like a storm that never rests. The morning light was pale, weak, and the air smelled of warm milk and tired bodies. She had barely slept. None of them had Matteo stepped from the bedroom already dressed, as if he had been waiting for this day even while praying it would never come. His shoulders were broad, but the weight on them was heavier than any pack he had carried before. He looked toward the door, then toward the nursery, then toward Alina. His eyes held calm, but not the calm of comfort. The calm of a man who learned long ago how to stand steady when fear is loud. Another knock rattled the door. A voice followed, clear and official, saying they needed to open up. Elena's breathing turned thin. Why, she whispered that it was them, and her voice cracked on the word. Her hands went to her mouth. Her body wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run with triplets in the next room and a life packed into a few suitcases. She had heard stories of families taken in minutes, children carried out with blankets still wrapped around them. Watching through blinds, silent, scared to be next, Matteo reached for her hand. His palm was warm, his voice stayed low. He told her to breathe, to stay behind him, to hold their babies quiet as best she could. He did not say he was afraid. He had never been allowed to say that, not even when bullets had flown. He opened the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway, both in dark uniforms, their faces tight with duty. One was older with tired eyes. The other was younger, jaw set, holding a folder and a pen. A 3rd man stood a step back, quiet, watching the hall. The word deportation was not spoken, but it hung in the air like cold fog. The older officer spoke first. He said they were there regarding immigration status, he said. There was a final order. He said the family needed to come with them now. His voice tried to stay neutral. But the apartment was too small to hide what this really was. Alina stepped forward, her baby on her hip, 2 more wailing behind her in a bassinet. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The baby in her arms reached a tiny hand toward the officer's badge, not knowing the world could hurt. Matteo nodded once, slow. He asked if he could have 5 minutes to dress the babies and gather their papers. The younger officer shook his head and said they had been told to move fast. He said they could bring only what they could carry. He said this was not a debate. Behind, the officer's and neighbor's door cracked open. A woman peeked out, eyes wide, then looked away when Matteo saw her. More doors opened quietly. The building filled with a soft, uneasy silence. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody said a word. Fear makes bystanders polite. Lena's knees felt weak. She had lived in this country for 7 years. She worked nights cleaning offices and days caring for babies she never thought she could have. She had learned the language slowly, painfully, with a notebook in her apron pocket. She paid taxes. She followed rules. She stayed invisible because invisible felt safe. But invisible was never enough. Matteo wasn't invisible. He was simply quiet. He asked again for a moment. The older officer hesitated, then said 2 minutes. His eyes flicked toward the crying babies and back to Matteo. As if trying to keep his face hard at the edge of something human, Matteo moved toward the living room shelf. His hands did not shake. Pulled down a small wooden box, worn and smooth at the corners. Alina knew that box. She had dusted it 100 times, but never opened it. She knew it held his past, the part he did not speak of unless night was very dark. He set it on the table between them. The younger officer watched, suspicious. He asked what that was. Matteo said it was proof of who he was. Proof that this family was not what the papers said. The lid lifted. Inside lay a folded uniform patch, stack of letters tied with twine, a photo of a much younger Matteo in camouflage, dirt on his cheeks, smiling beside men with tired eyes and arms around each other. And on top, resting heavy and bright, was a military medal. Bronze with a blue ribbon scratched by time, catching the morning light like a quiet flame. The hallway went still. The older officer's eyes changed first. He knew what that metal meant before he even read the words on it. He stepped closer without meaning to. The younger officer stopped breathing for a beat, his mouth parting slightly. The third man, the silent one, leaned in to Mateo looked at them, steady. He said he served in the U.S. Army. He said he enlisted under a special program years ago, when his clean record and language skills were needed. He said he deployed twice. He said he bled for this country, not for applause, but because he believed in the promise it made. He said he came home with scars he did not show, and a heart that still stood when it hurt. Alina stared at him, eyes wet, shocked not by the words, but by how long he had carried them in silence. He had never talked about the nights he woke sweating. Never talked about the friend he lost to a roadside blast. Never talked about the day he earned that medal. Believed some battles were not meant to be displayed. But today, silence was not enough to protect his family. The older officer swallowed. He reached for the folder in the younger officer's hand. He scanned it faster now, flipping pages with a different urgency. The younger officer said the order was final. The older one did not argue. He simply said, "Wait." He stepped aside and made a call. Mateo stood still while the officer spoke into his phone, voice low, almost respectful now. The babies cried in the next room, softer, like they sensed the air had shifted. Alina rocked the one in her arms, her eyes never leaving the metal as if it was the only solid thing left. Minutes passed like hours. The older officer returned. His face was serious, but not cold. He said the order was being paused immediately. Said there were protections for veterans that had not been properly applied. Said there was a review already being requested at a higher level. He said, "Nobody was taking this family today." Alina blinked, not believing it. The younger officer looked stunned, like the world had moved under him without asking. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The law had spoken through a different door than he expected. Mateo did not smile wide. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded once, slow, as if he had already forgiven people for not knowing him. His voice stayed calm. He thanked them. The older officer looked at the triplets' bassinet, then at Alina. His voice softened. He said they could take their time now. He said he was sorry for the fear this caused. He said he had a father who served too, and he knew what sacrifice looked like when it came home and tried to live ordinary. Elena's tears slipped down, quiet and full.
Ow.
Her shoulders shook. She said thank you over and over without words needing to be perfect. Her baby pressed a cheek against her chest and finally fell asleep. In the hallway, the neighbors had drifted closer. They stood in a loose line, watching the metal, watching Mateo, watching something shift inside themselves. A man from 2 doors down stepped forward and said he didn't know. Another woman placed her hand over her mouth with shame. The silence that had protected fear now turned into silent respect. The officers left with slower steps than they came in with. The younger one glanced back once, eyes lowered now, not in defeat, but in understanding. The older one gave Mateo a small nod that meant more than any loud praise. When the door closed, the apartment felt warmer, even though nothing had changed outside. Alina sank into a chair, holding the baby close. Mateo knelt beside the bassinet, checking each tiny face, each breath. His hands moved like practice, gentle and sure. Alina asked why he never told her. Mateo said he didn't want his past to become their whole story. He said he wanted their home to be about love, not war. He looked at the medal and said, "Some honors are not meant to be used, only carried. But when your family is on the edge, even quiet honor must speak." He placed the medal back in the box, then hesitated. He set it on the shelf again, but this time the lid stayed open. Not because he was proud in a loud way, because his children deserved to grow up seeing what their father had done to keep promises. Even when promises don't keep themselves. That day did not erase the struggle ahead. Papers still needed fixing. Time still needed patience. But the family remained in their home, together, safe for one more morning. Sometimes that is how hope survives. One morning at a time. Because a nation is not only measured by its borders, it is measured by how it treats the people who have already given it their hearts. If this story moved you, comment where you're watching from. Tell us what respect and sacrifice mean to you. And subscribe for more cinematic stories about quiet strength, family, and the moments that remind us what real honor looks like.